here we are at lesson 7. A red letter day for me. Look, I finally gave in. I had that haircut. You'd hardly recognise me now. Australia has managed to get its cases down to pretty well 0. Queensland certainly, so I ran the risk in case there's a second wave of the virus. Now, after 7 lessons, if you've followed this course, you possibly think I'm super glued to this armchair. So I'm going to do something quite different today. I'm going to take you out my back door and show you an Australian winter. It's winter here now, for those of you who are not Aussies. So, way outside. This is my back lawn. And this is the delightful Currumbin Creek. That's looking upstream. About 11 kilometres up, it starts in the Kugel National Park with a couple of cute little waterfalls. You can walk up beside it. As you can see, I've got a lovely little sandy beach here in the front. At high tide, because this is tidal, the water comes right up to the steps. You might occasionally hear a bit of highway noise in my videos because there's the Gold Coast Highway there, Highway 1. It's currently 23 degrees on the Gold Coast. Terrible cold winter we're having here, aren't we? Okay, well, that's outside.
Well, here I am, back in my comfort zone, super glued in the armchair, Duck looking over my shoulder. I'll introduce you to Duck next lesson. Duck is my supervisor. When I do a really bad video, worse than normal, Duck demands that I redo it. What have I got lined up for lesson 7? We're going to look at this goal or quest that you set your character off on. We've tracked this through from setting the character up in status quo to having an inciting incident, and now we're looking at the goal. The other thing I intend to do this lesson is quite different. I'm going to show you why spelling, grammar, punctuation is so important. And it may surprise you, it's not why you think. Here's a clue. It's strongly allied to why purple prose is not acceptable, to why the reader address is no longer acceptable, to why monotonous sentence structure is not acceptable. All these things are allied. Are you intrigued? Well, you jolly well should be, because I put a lot of work into these lessons. All right, let's have a look at the first topic. We've had a look last week at the inciting incident, and so that inciting incident has pushed our character into action, has given them a strong or burning goal, or sent them off on a quest. How good is that goal or quest? Is it good enough to sustain the plot, keep the reader engrossed? There are several grades of story. I mean, they go from plain boring, where you dump it within the first chapter, through to mildly interesting, exciting, and top of the pile, page turner, can't put the thing down. Now, I suggest we should be aiming for the top, not the bottom of that list. And the way to do that is to ensure that you have a strong goal for your character. I'm going to give you a test for the strength, the value of your character's goal. It's a 3-part test, and if you've already got a work in progress, stop right now, go back, have a look, find the goal or quest you're sending your character on, and run it through this test kit. Here are the 3 main elements of finding a strong goal.
Please be aware that this is one of the most important things that I could possibly show you. Having a strong goal or quest for your character is the key to a good plot. And there are 3 tests that you can run on the goal that you've given your character to see if it's going to be good enough. Very simple 3 tests. Here it is. The first one is consequences. And you ask yourself, what will happen if my character fails? The second one is the sacrifice or risk.
and you ask yourself, what is my character prepared to sacrifice or risk to achieve this goal? And the third is the quality of the opposition. And you ask yourself, how formidable is the opposition, the antagonist? Now, I'm going to go through these in great detail, so if you didn't pick it up then, don't worry at all.
All right, let's play consequences. The most important question you can ask about the character's goal or quest is, what happens if they fail? Okay, fail in the quest to find adequate toilet paper, you might have to fall back on pages out of the newspaper or something else. Not a big deal. The character can't find her grandfather's war record. What a shame. These are not earth-shaking consequences for failure, are they? I think we can agree that there's a sliding scale of consequences that make the goal more gripping. Doesn't get the guy she wants. If you're a romance reader, you'll say, no, that's a pretty strong consequence. Then you get into things like have his career destroyed or her career destroyed. Will lose the respect of family or of society. Will lose family. Will have family killed. These are stepping up, aren't they? At the top, we normally consider character losing his or her own life to be the steepest consequence. Now, a parent might say, well, I would rather die than see my child lose his or her life. Well, that's possible. But in the scale of things, we normally see the character's own death as the biggest failure of the lot. Now, of course, tucked into this are all these world-shattering events, like if the character fails, the entire tribe or city will be wiped out. The country loses to the enemy. Some hideous thing is unleashed on the world. Whether you place those things above a single human life, I don't know, but they're all up there. These are much bigger goals than I can't find my grandfather's war record. Can we agree on that? So that's the first thing you should test. How strong is that goal? Give it a ranking out of 10 or out of 100 to see how you fare, and be honest about it. All right, this time we're talking about sacrifice. The sacrifice or sacrifices that the character is prepared to make to pursue this goal. It's very easy to get confused with the end result. What happens if the character fails? We've dealt with that. This is what they're prepared to accept, to take on board when they first step out. Now, the stronger the sacrifice that the character is prepared to make, might never happen, it's a preparedness. The stronger that possible sacrifice is, the stronger your story is. Now, a soldier in any era who is going off to war knows that there's always a chance that he or she will be killed. So that's the ultimate sacrifice for country. The person that's dealing with some really ugly customers who gets involved and decides to meddle in their affairs for justice knows that he or she may be putting their own family at risk. Now, if they pursue that goal, these are possible sacrifices they are taking on board. Might never happen. They might try to safeguard their family, but the possibility is there. And so that's a pretty strong goal if they will take on those risks. What's the risk that they're prepared to take? Now, our character who wants to find out her grandfather's war record, what's the risk for her? Not a lot. She might find out he was branded a coward, but these are not enormous risks unless you're very fussy about such things. So that's question 2. How great is the risk? How great is the potential sacrifice that this person is prepared to make? If you go into something knowing you could harm your family or knowing that you could be destroyed, then you've taken on an enormous goal. The third factor to consider is the strength of the opposition. And this is an interesting one because it can save an otherwise dull plot. For example, the character that I keep mentioning who is seeking out her grandfather's war record. It doesn't have a very strong consequence if she fails. She has no great sacrifice to make. So At that level, it's not a very strong plot. But what if someone in the family or someone in the military is blocking her every move, is hotly opposed to her finding out anything, is destroying records, is who knows what they're doing. But that opposition makes for a much more interesting plot, because now we want to find out what's going on that they don't want her to know. True? Okay, so try to build in some very strong opposition to your character's goal or quest. Often this is tied up with one person, and we call that person the antagonist. It can be also just plain villain, right? An antagonist isn't necessarily the villain. An antagonist can just be someone who's irascible or a nuisance or holding things up. Right? They don't have to be a thorough baddie. The antagonist, the opposition, can even be Mother Nature. If you're climbing Everest, you mightn't have an enemy that's trying to shoot you down, but you certainly have a very difficult climate and climb that is trying to stop you reaching the top. So there can be all sorts of opponents to someone's goal or quest. But the stronger you make that opposition, the better for your story. So make your villains larger than life. Not so much larger that they become unrealistic or unbelievable. Make them tough, make them brutal, make them determined, so that your poor old character has a lot to contend with. Make sure the foe is formidable. All right, a 3-point checklist. I'm going to put one up on the screen. You can email me and get a copy of it to fill out yourself, but gee, it's easy enough to draw it up. Fill this out. Give your character's goal a score out of 10 for each of these 3. So you'll end up with a score out of 30. If it's not in the high range, is there a way to strengthen one of these aspects? This is one of the things that I do when I mentor a writer. I look at these goals and I suggest ways that they could pep one up, right? Make a stronger opposition or a stronger consequence or a stronger sacrifice. There's no reason you can't do that for yourself. So run your character's goal through these 3 things and see if you can get well above 50%. 50% is not a very strong story. Get yourself well above 15 out of 30, okay? Aim for 20 plus. And be honest, be brutally honest. It's so easy to think your story's so wonderful that, the toilet paper quest takes on great energy for you, okay? In fact, this is such an important aspect of your story. I'll make you an offer. If you're prepared to fill out the form and show the consequence, the sacrifice, and the opposition in point form so that I can understand what's going on, let me rate for you. Send it to me. Now, don't send me chapters. Do not send me summaries of the story. I want you to précis exactly what the consequence is if your character fails, what the sacrifice is they're prepared to make when they set out, and how strong the opposition is. Send it to me like that, and I will certainly give you an honest answer about whether this plot has legs. Deal? Good.
This is what I had in mind. It's a very simple form. You can scribble it out on a piece of paper if you want, but if you'd really like this one, I'm happy to send it to you. As you can see, you write in the character's name. In 25 words or less, you say what the goal or quest would be. You fill out the consequences in descending order of severity. After all, it's the really tough ones we want to find out about. So what are the worst things that will happen if the character fails? Give yourself a score out of 10 for that. Sacrifice in descending order of severity. What possible sacrifices? Remember, it's only possible sacrifices will the character accept when he or she takes on the goal. Give yourself a rating. And the final one, how tough or how formidable is the opposition or antagonist. Score out of 10, and you can end up with a total score of 30.
The next section of this lesson is a discussion on why punctuation, grammar and spelling are important. I suggested that you wouldn't guess the reason. Did you say because poor spelling, grammar and punctuation is unprofessional? No. Well, yes it is, but it can be remedied. That's not the reason. Did you say because these are the only things we have to work with, so it's crucial that we know how to use them well? You're much closer to the truth. That's certainly very true. Words, the dots and dashes we put between them and the order that we put them in, that's all we've got to communicate what's up here. So it's absolutely crucial that you understand the tools of your trade. This is your toolbox. Sermon over, but that's not the reason. What's the reason, do you think? Well, I'm not going to tell you outright initially. I'm going to show you 4 examples of writing, short passages, not wonderful writing, just passages of writing. And I'm not going to do the voiceover that I would normally do. I want you to read these things. So I will allow time for you to read it, probably too much time. You'll just have to cogitate in between the passages. And after you've seen all 4, then I'll pose the same question again. What's wrong with having poor punctuation, grammar, or what have you? My argument is, what you figure out for yourself is of far more value and will stick in your head longer than just having someone tell you.
4 passages for you to ponder. Please don't expect great writing. They've been dashed off to illustrate a point. I'm going to read through these silently to pace you a little bit. I won't read aloud. I want you to read these yourself and see what effect the writing has on you. When I'm about to change screens, I'll let you know that. Okay, here's the first passage. Okay, I'm moving on to passage 2. Okay, I hope you finished that one. Let's go on to passage 3. And the last passage. Very well. Did you find something in common for all those passages?
Well, what did you discover by that exercise? Now, I appreciate that it's not the same as if you're in the middle of a story that you've been absolutely engaged with for a couple of hundred pages. But try and imagine that. When you stumble on the spelling error, the funny punctuation, the repetitious expression, or the reader address, didn't you suddenly go, oh, didn't it shock you? Didn't it break the spell? If you're really into that story, if you were on the edge of your seat watching this happen, and suddenly this spelling error or punctuation error goes slap in the face, what has happened? It has lifted you out of that essential reverie you need when you're reading. And it all boils down to what the reading experience is all about. It all boils down to the contract that you establish with your reader. It's a contract between writer and reader. The reader wants to read your story, wants to become engrossed in it. That's why they opened the book in the first place. It promised them a different world. And if you're a good writer, you've established that world and they're immersed in it. I'm sure you've heard the expression, I think it was devised by Coleridge, the willing suspension of disbelief. We know, as readers, we know these are just squiggles on a page. But once we become immersed in the story, when we choose to become immersed in the story that someone is telling us, it's no longer words on a page. It's events happening up here, and we're part of it. We're listening, we're watching, we're seeing it happen before our eyes. Until the flaming author makes a typo, bang, it's gone. We're like a bubble, we rise to the surface, pop, we're out of there. It's destroyed it for us. You as writer have broken the contract. Not the reader. The reader was very prepared to remain immersed. You have broken the contract. You are obliged to keep your reader submerged. Sorry. Don't let them surface. There will be distractions out there in the real world. Kids crying, car horns blowing, all manner of things that may or may not drag them out of that story. But don't let the author do it. And there's so many ways you can make this terrible blunder. One is to have imperfect copy, like spelling errors, punctuation errors, strange grammatical expressions. These are the real reasons we don't want these things, because we don't want to draw the reader's attention to words on a page, because they're living up here, not on that page. The minute you make them stumble over an expression, make them reread a line because they didn't quite understand it, you've broken the contract. You have challenged your reader, taken them out of that wonderful world. If you said that the Sydney Opera House occupies the same land mass as New York City, bang, out of the story again, because you've hit them with something that could not possibly be true. And so suddenly they're thinking facts, wondering about the veracity of what you've said, instead of enjoying the story. You must never draw your reader's attention to the fact that this is just a book with words on the page. And there are so many different ways you can do that. And as I go through this course, I'm going to point out some of these danger points where you break the contract and let your reader go, actually push them away from your story. That's what it's all about. Well, that concludes lesson 7. What have I left you as your tasks for the week? Number 1 is to assess the quality of the goal you've set your character. And as I said, if you want me to double check whether you're being soft on yourself, send that form to me and I will tell you in no uncertain terms if you've got a good goal or not. The second thing I'd like you to do is prepare for next week. I want you to have now your character chosen, the status quo you're going to start with, the inciting incident, and hopefully the goal as well, or the quest you're going to send them on. Because next week, I'm departing from this process of going down through the chain of the essential elements. I'm departing from that because we have enough of those elements now for you to write your first chapter. Next week, I'm going to show you how to write an absolutely scorching first chapter. All the things you need to grab your reader in that first chapter. So please assemble all the elements so you're not found wanting when we have to write the chapter. And don't forget, we're very close to the end of the month. The 30th of the month is the deadline for a writing competition. It's a very easy writing competition based on a writing prompt. All the details are in lesson 3. If you can't find lesson 3, email me and I will send you the details of that competition. I'd love you to be entered in it. You may win a session of mentoring with me. So I'm going to close with my email address, which you can use for all of those different things. And so I'll sign off right here. Bye until next week, and please keep safe.